Okay.
using Zoom, and Gabrielle Benefield here, world's top agile trainer and founder of Mobius. Is it Mobius Loop or is it
Mobius, but you go to mobiusloop.com. So we're live. Welcome. I'm really pleased today. We're going to be looking at the Pivoting in a Pandemic series. So all of us moving so incredibly quickly at the moment, trying to deal with a lot of chaos. And we've been contacted by people saying, how do we deal with this with our businesses? What can we do to help the general community and society? So really interesting story. That's something that's been going around the Agile community for a while is a restaurant in London, Riccardos restaurant. And they've already done incredible things to pivot from a very traditional Italian restaurant into a fully agile restaurant. And then in the midst of the pandemic, Riccardo has upped the ante. So where we might be doing sprints, which could take a couple of weeks, suddenly things happen within mere hours. So we're going to go live and speak to Riccardo Mariti, the owner. Over to you, Riccardo. Can you tell us a little bit about the restaurant, which I can see you're sitting in right now, and give us the background where this all started, right when the pandemic started to hit?
Yeah, well, just give you a bit of, I mean, I'm in the restaurant. I can just swing it around so you can see. That way is the Fulham Road. That behind me, I think John. Hello, John. Why don't you wave? Say hello.
Hi, John.
Pash over here having her dinner. And we're really sort of at the moment just eating on the go, a little bit like hospital shift workers round the clock. To give you a little bit of background about, I discovered Agile and specifically Scrum about in 2016, and we implemented it in the restaurant. And that's a long story, but I won't get into it. But basically, we've ended up with a managerless restaurant where we have an autonomous, empowered team who have been allowed and encouraged to drop decision making down to the very lowest level. So people in the front line are actually making decisions in real time about how, what to do to give better customer service and sort out problems and so on and so forth. And it's totally transformed our business. When this whole pandemic hit, we realized that we'd have to make some big changes. And we were able to, in fact, Joe Justice, who introduced us formally recently, said, because he was following on the what were we using, WhatsApp group, that we managed to sort of pivot the whole strategic direction of the company within about a 5-hour period. And we turned ourselves from being forced to close by the government as a restaurant into a deli and home delivery service, offering a variety of other services as well. Sort of
so take us through that, because I think a lot of people are dealing with something very like this. So we're talking, I think it was only last week we started speaking. Was it last week? It feels like It's been at least a month now. Okay.
Yeah.
So last week I saw you post something on Facebook and I went, wow, that's quite interesting what's happening over there. And so when we first spoke, you said you had a restaurant where you have a full restaurant and everybody's coming to it. It suddenly dwindled. And I want to know what happened in that timeline when you had that, what do I do next moment? The doors are going to close tomorrow. What happened next? Take us through a bit of a timeline.
Well, I had a little bit of prior knowledge because we were looking at what was happening in Italy and places like that. So we kind of like, you start hearing news and thinking, well, what happens if it happens here? What if they close restaurants? What if they send everyone home? I mean, it was a totally new concept. And I made a decision very early on. I don't want to close under any circumstances. If I'm the last man standing, I don't care. We're not going to close. I'm going to be here. If it's dangerous for my team members, well, they can stay at home, but I'm going to be of service in some way to the community. We're celebrating 25 years in May, and I was determined to make that party and not be closed and have to reopen for it. So I think a lot of it is to do with the initial. I remember somebody saying about sports injuries, it's what you do in the first hour or two and especially the first 24 hours that makes the difference in the whole recovery. And I think it's really important to move fast on these type of things. So we made a decision, and I think with the agile mindset, I was able to say, well, if it's the wrong decision, it doesn't matter, because we can still, as long as we're moving, we can change direction. And so just made lots of inquiries as to friends and suppliers who supply other delis locally. What are your top 10 items you sell to those people? Why don't we get a big stock of that? And so we stocked the restaurant with those items, and 48 hours later, they announced on, I think on the Wednesday, that on Friday night, restaurants were going to close.
When you mentioned, you know, you knew what was happening from Italy. You're an Italian restaurant. Was your supply chain from Italy? Were there any issues with getting inputs from there?
It used to be. We used to have 95% of our product from Italy, and because of the way that the world has changed recently, my regulars really like local produce. So we're producing Italian recipes and Italian food, but really using a lot of local produce. So of course we'll use Italian pasta and those type of things. So far I haven't had any problem at all getting supplies. A little delay, maybe a day or two. But I'm thinking that, you know, the Italian supplies have to go through France in the same way that France want to sell their supplies to Italy. And so they haven't closed the borders for food items. My suppliers told me that if they tried to put any machinery at all on the trucks, they wouldn't get through. So food items seems to be one of those items that can get through. So getting the product hasn't been a major problem. Getting it now that we're at the end of the month and we have to pay all our suppliers, that's another thing we can get into later.
Right.
You know, that's a whole new ball game, you know, because our cash flow has been quite dramatically compromised because of what's going on, but we're dealing with it.
Right. So I want to take through the mindset, because again, what we're trying to do is help other people who are in the same position. And if you look at the way businesses are reacting, some are paralyzed right now. And if you're a restaurant, you think, well, my entire business is gone. The doors are closed. I can't possibly trade. I have to scale back, get rid of staff. There's nothing else I can do. Yet you took a very different approach. And I want to go back into how you did that. There was some very fast-paced customer discovery. You told me you sent out an email, you did an immediate outreach, and you came up with this new model. So talk us through how you came up from the night where you had to close the doors to the next day, because I know you did a very fast pivot to open the doors again.
Well, on that Wednesday, or maybe it could have been a third, we split our list because we were warming up our list, because we hadn't done a broadcast for some time. We've got about 15,000 people on our list. And so we said, okay, let's test it to see whether we're getting, I don't know if you know about mass mailings. If you get a certain amount of bounces or email addresses are not valid and so on, then you start getting blacklisted by the senders, and it's become a very big deal now. So we started testing them in batches of 1,000, which actually was good because we were getting feedback and able to answer people, and just basically sending out a letter saying, look, we intend to stay open. We will turn restaurant into a deli stroke supermarket and help you with anything you need. We have team members on our team who are multi-skilled, are able to look after plumbing, electrics, those type of things. We'll do that on a pro bono basis for the local community. Thank you. Thank you so much. They will do that on a pro bono basis for the local community as a service, because we're here and we want to be of help.
Are you having really nice Italian coffee while we all have to watch you with our homemade second-class citizen coffee?
Well, actually, the pressure gauge on the espresso machine's gone, and so we can't use that at the moment. So this is one of those old-fashioned Italian percolators that somebody managed to find, and they've been making coffee on the stove the old-fashioned way. So yeah, I'm having a bit of coffee, but it's only the second one today.
You probably need it.
Yeah.
And
so
where where did the idea come from for the deli supermarket? I thought that was an interesting twist. And tell us how you repurposed the restaurant.
Well, I figured, what are the businesses that can stay open? And I mean, to give you a tiny bit of background just for us, or maybe why it was so important to me. The last year, we've had an enormous hit on a big court case with our landlords, which we lost, and we had to do a refurbishment in the kitchen. We spent about between 200 and 250,000 pounds from our working capital, and we were really cash strapped. And so I just went out and raised some money about 2 weeks before this whole pandemic hit. Thank God. But it relied on us moving into our busiest time of the year, which is the summer, and it starts right now. So it starts from say after Easter, starting the 1st of May, we normally go mad. We have the Chelsea Flower Show and all these events coming in. And I thought, I've got to keep this going. I've got to keep some money in. And what are the companies that are not being closed down? And as far as I could see, the only companies not being closed down were supermarkets. So we said, well, why don't we call ourselves a supermarket? What do we need to do? Well, we need to start selling stuff that they sell there. And I had to put my restaurant company in a dormant status. We've launched a new company, which I had a dormant company anyway. So we've kind of pulled that one back off the shelf and relaunched that as a deli supermarket home delivery service, which allows us to operate freely, legally.
And how did you physically, I know you're going to do a bit of a walkthrough later for us, but how did you physically get that organized? Because you had restaurant people sitting in there with the kitchen. So how do you go to a deli supermarket suddenly?
We started doing it while there were people actually sitting in the restaurant. So as we got
Really?
the deliveries, we were telling them what was going on. And we know 80% of our customers, they were all the people that came in on the last 2 days. They would have come in for a last meal, and a very good friend of my son's, Eugene, and his girlfriend came in, and they said, this is the last supper. I think they were the last people to eat in the restaurant, on that Friday night. So we were just telling them as we were going along what we were doing and so on, and start moving everything from upstairs, everything from downstairs, which is where we normally keep all our storage, upstairs into the restaurant, so that we could start to see where everything was, what our stocks were, and so on. And one of the things about Scrum and being agile is there's really successful teams, as you know, Gabrielle, are co-located, preferably in the same room, close enough that you could reach out and touch somebody on the shoulder. So we said, okay, well, let's really do that. If we're going to do that, let's all be in the same room as much as possible. We can't move down into the kitchen, so we do have a couple of people in the kitchen cooking. But as soon as they're free, they keep coming up. So we're all in one communal space now.
And one of the interesting things, people who haven't read the backstory of Riccardos, is what I love is that everybody has cross-trained. And so people can take on each other's jobs. And not only that, but I think there's a certain amount of being super adaptive and resilient to change. And I think you test this out in normal life. So you were telling me about how you can switch team members in and out and how you do that. Tell us a bit about that. And if you think that made a difference, being able to move this fast.
I mean, I've always been of the opinion that, I remember hearing in the military, 2 is 1 and 1 is none was my favorite line, which is if you've got one of anything, it's the same as having nothing, because everything always breaks.
Right.
And marketers like Dan Kennedy and people like that always said, the most dangerous number in any business is 1. If you've got one person that can do something. And looking at that fantastic paper, Shock Therapy, on Scrum, where one of the rules was, if you're the only person in the company that can do something, you're not allowed to do it on your own anymore. You have to pair up with somebody else. So it's kind of like those things kind of really hit you again and again. So I try to factor that into the fabric of what we do. So we would say, for example, okay, coffee machine's not working, bang, red tag it. In the middle of the service, when it was working, or this piece of equipment could be, you know, an oven or whatever it was, and just say, right, how are you going to handle the next 2 hours? You're not allowed to use that bit of equipment, and watch how people would adapt. And we've been playing this game for a long time, even with people. So we would take a team member who was, especially our most experienced team member, in the middle of a busy service, and I'd say, come and sit down with me. We're not going to do anything for an hour. Let's see what happens. You know, what would happen if a customer got very sick and you had to take them up to one of the hospitals? You would probably go, right? Yeah, because you're the best English speaking. Okay, good. So that's just happened in our scenario. Sit down, let's see what happens. And so I think the team were very used to that and having to figure things out for themselves. And I think what I really like is that whole Socratic sort of approach to teaching, where you're not telling anybody anything anymore. You're just asking them questions and saying, I need to make a decision. Okay, why don't you make that decision? And I'll tell you after you've made it, and we'll implement it. And then I'll tell you what I would have done if it was different. And very often, actually, they come up with much better decisions than I would have done. I promise you, it's very
humbling, isn't it?
Yeah, and exciting to see how resourceful people really are when you give them the space to do that.
So could I come in and red tag all the pasta? Would you recover from that pretty quickly?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we'd figure out a way, you know. We make our own pasta out of zucchini anyway, so we got a really nice linguine zucchini we can make. So if you said no, there's no more wheat pasta, you know.
You'd adapt pretty fast. Okay, so now,
yeah.
So now you've got your deli and supermarket, and how's that running? Getting the capacity to be able to take these orders and run a shop and all of that, because again, there's probably some restaurants that could do this tomorrow and take this action. What would you advise them to do?
I was lucky. I mean, we started doing home delivery 10 years before Deliveroo existed or anybody else was doing. We were doing our own with our own drivers. And I realized one of the biggest bottlenecks for us was taking orders on the phone. So I'm in my 4th iteration of a website now. I'm my 4th version, maybe 5th, because I think we just changed to Laravel for some reason from Cape PHP. And we're now experimenting with it. And I've got so I had the site up and running and ready to go. So that was lucky. But I think there are many ready-made portals that would allow people to, like Shopify and those type of things, especially in a deli environment. Because the problem was we couldn't use something like Shopify for a restaurant because we had to schedule deliveries at specific times. So we had to build that functionality into our website, which kind of made it very generic to restaurants. But
so who's doing the deliveries at the moment?
Pash drives, I drive. We have a lot of people in the local vicinity. We have a custom made, which I'll get you a photograph of, electric bike, which we're just dusting off now. And that's very cool. That's been sitting in the garage for the last 2 years. It's a very cool electric dragster, proper electric dragster. A friend of mine had a motorbike shop and he had it made. So that's there. We'll be using that. And, you know, foot power, leg power. I've had a lot of customers and volunteering to come and do deliveries. They say, we've got a car, we'd like to do a service. Just 1 second. Thank you. Thank you very much. My friend Johnson, he's just come in and put some new locks on our door. Thank you.
It's very local. Hey, what's different? Let's, I mean, it sounds like, you know, it's business as usual, but what's different with the pace? Because again, all this has happened. We haven't even got to the most, I think, one of the most interesting parts of the story, which is your new hospital delivery. So why is this different to business the week before?
I think what's different is you start off with one idea of how it's going to look. And then obviously, you know, government are talking about things, and my advisors were saying to me, you know, you should be able to raise a couple of $100,000 really easily, help you with cash flow and so on and so forth. And so you start planning everything. Okay, we could do that, and that. And then everything changes. So, you know, government say we'll guarantee loans, but of course the bank needs loan criteria. But if we're going to forecast our cash flows into the future, then at worst it's a lie, at best it's a guess, and we don't like guesses or lies, and we've got nothing to base it on because we have no idea how long we're going to be here for. So suddenly any ideas of bank funding gone. So okay, that's gone. The next thing, we were told that we could furlough our team members, and I spoke to my accountant, said, well, if I furlough my team members, can we still have them volunteer for the new company? And my accountant said, yes, you probably could, but you can't pay them in the new company, but they could volunteer. But that's an arguable point, and there's nobody's, as you know, we were on a call with the mayoral candidate today, and he's taking that question to the Chancellor of the Exchequer today, see if he can get an answer for us, as to whether they'll allow it or not. So we're sort of planning things in real time, and then suddenly the rules seem to change, or the rules are then articulated in a slightly different way. We were told that all small companies would get £25,000 loan from the government, and VAT would be deferred, would be cancelled for 3 months. That was our understanding anyway, PAYE. And we found out that the loans aren't available to us because our rateable value is too high, and all the VAT, PAYE, national insurance is just deferred payment until the end of the year. So we still got to pay it. So we'll end up at the end of this, loaded with debt. So I think you start fantasizing that, oh yeah, I think we can handle this because we've got this, we've got all these resources, and suddenly all your resources are taken away. So then you've got to become a little bit more, I don't know, whatever, creative. Then I've just lost all except one of my kitchen team for a variety of different reasons, but mainly because I think I explained before, one of my team, his wife lost a baby a year and a half ago. She's pregnant again now, and she's very, very scared of him coming to work and catching something, giving it to her, and them losing the second baby, which is totally understandable. It's like, okay, you've got to go home right now. If that's a fear, you've really got to go. We can't have you here. Another team member with a tremendous amount of, he has a lot of family. He's Neapolitan, tremendous amount of family in Naples, scared as anything. You cannot work, family pressure, he's caved in. And so I'm left with one cook. Now, John here has cooked in the past. Come and say hello, John.
Hi there.
Hey, John. How's it going? John, how's it going in Chaos Central?
How's it going?
Very well indeed, actually.
Has it calmed down today? I know it's been pretty manic.
Has it calmed down today a bit? Yeah, it's all a bit calmer. But yeah, but it should.
It's good actually, because we sold like £400.
Great.
Like, literally just
oh well, one person, £400 order.
Fantastic.
Very good. Fantastic.
He has the diet. We did straight away for a month.
Good. So yeah, I mean, so John's cooked before. I cooked for the first 6 years of being in the restaurant business. So I know how to cook, and we're going back to cooking tomorrow. So that's all changed since yesterday.
And tell us about the hospitals. So I know the hospitals actually contacted you. What's their situation? And
yeah, I mean, they picked up on the fact that we were open and just phoned and just said, look, we really need some help, and could you supply hot meals to intensive care doctors, surgeons, and ambulance drivers and so on. So we said we would, and not just that, but also they've asked for products now. So it's just really nice because we're able to, we don't make any money on that at all. So in fact, we probably lose a bit of money, but not that much. But they're covering the cost of us being able to use our suppliers. So it's quite nice for us to be able to give more business to our suppliers to support them, because I know that probably, I'm guessing 80% of one of our main suppliers of their businesses are closed now because they just deal with restaurants.
Well, I noticed the other day, I saw the news that Carluccio's, which if you're not from the UK, they're a very big Italian chain, and they were quite dominant in the market. And I heard that closed the other day. Is this directly from the pandemic, or was it gearing up anyway?
I don't know, but I mean, 4,500 people, laid off without any compensation at all.
Mm. And the biggest problem I'm quite worried about actually is, these businesses will go under, and then trying to get a new business up and running is so difficult. I mean, all the mechanics of that and the chain that happens. So if you think about a restaurant, you've got your supply chains, you've got the people working for you, you've got your lease holder, I'm guessing you're renting, how that all works. It's just a sort of cascade failure at its worst. Yeah. And getting this up and running is going to be so hard, because imagine trying to raise financing again, trying to get premises, trying to outfit it, trying to hire staff. Even getting people back. Many London businesses, even with Brexit, was quite an interesting one with people from Europe. But are you seeing people actually leaving the country and going home, or, and attracting that talent again is going to be really tough, isn't it?
A lot of people repatriated in the last couple of weeks. Mm. But my observation really that very few people talk about nowadays is, the growers, the people, the people who are growing the produce, or the winemakers or whatever they are. It's just that they're not getting paid.
Right, which means they can't harvest, which means they won't therefore plant again. I heard in America they had some problems with they can't get the laborers up, and it's harvest time, so everything's going to die off. And imagine that in the supply chain. So this is why it's that, very interesting. It's an ecosystem that if one part of that fails, and it could be these end small businesses, we need to keep them alive. And this is a worry, because from the public, we read the news saying that there's going to be finance for small businesses, but it sounds like that's not really happening at the same pace that we need it to happen. And I'm worried that maybe government isn't even as agile as it should be. So they're not used to responding fast. And UK government, for people, again, not familiar with the UK market, they actually went pretty agile. There's some quite agile parts of UK government, more than many. There's been many case studies, and I've worked with them personally.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering, this response, it seems like there's definitely a lag. The story you're telling today, I hadn't really heard of the reality of the fact that there are loans available if you can prove you can get the cash flow. And who could possibly prove that at the moment? That's just a huge constraint.
It's very similar about 2018 when the government bailed out the banks, and they said, we'll do it on the basis that you lend to small businesses, and they never did. And that was all hush-hush, Nobody, it was not politically good to make too big a deal about that. Nobody even got punished for it. And I'm not blaming anybody, but it's just, it's a shame. I'd much rather you didn't make the promise than you made a promise and you didn't deliver. That's all. I'd much rather they said, you're on your own. We don't know what we're doing. Why don't we all figure this out together? And come up with some good ideas and let us know what they are, and so on, rather than it's okay, we're going to get through this, and blah, 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 we're strong people, and that's it. That's the end of it.
I think there's that reality lens. Actually, while you're talking, Riccardo, I'm thinking about, and I want to do a tour and show how you actually organize in a very agile fashion with your scrum boards and things, because I'm looking at that thinking, is there something like the equivalent of Riccardo's restaurant happening in UK government and governments around the world, where they can move fast and just respond with things that are going to make a real difference? Are they making those obstacles obvious? Or is there this big disconnect, this need for government big picture to have these wonderful sounding plans? But you're right. I think if I was a small business owner, the risk to you is you take on all this risk expecting to get some sort of bailout. And if it doesn't happen, you've burned through your own personal cash reserves and given personal guarantees, which, you could lose everything. And I think a lot of business owners might not even be in as good a position as you. They're really working in it with a much shorter fuse.
Yeah, I mean, so for example, on the furlough, which is the payment that the government say that we will guarantee 80% of salaries of last 12 weeks of salary for any employees up to £2,500 per month, for any employees you intend to keep on, and we will pay that back to the companies. And they said, we're going to create an online portal for that and have that readily available, and the money will go straight into your account once you've paid it out. I've now found out that it definitely won't be available until the end of April, and there's a possibility that it might not be available till June. I've got a burn rate right now of £10,000 a week just on my salaries alone. So if I leave it until the end of June, we're looking at 20. Well, say cut it down, because we're probably paying out a little bit less now. We won't be paying holiday. But it's say 15,000 a week, so 30,000. Sorry, it's 15,000 every 2 weeks, 30,000 a month, 3 months. That's 90 grand, and that's before we've paid any suppliers, paid rent, or anything. And it's not really sustainable. You know,
that means that all these restaurants who didn't even pivot. I mean, you're actually in amongst this a bit of a success story that you got a business up and running. So of all these other businesses, they must have essentially just closed and that's it, game over.
Yeah, but I mean, a lot of them said they were furloughing people, but it'd be interesting to see whether they make the first, second, third, fourth payment to their team members without getting the money in. Because because a lot of restaurants in the UK, they're on 0 hours contract. And there was been some talk, certainly from my accountant, saying there's a possibility they won't honor 0 hours contract because we're not obliged to pay them.
I've heard that actually in other countries, so I wouldn't be surprised if that happened. But it's that lack of information, isn't it? And the speed of information, getting the accuracy out, that's quite a problem with any of the governments in the world at the moment.
So I think that what you were saying about, you know, being agile in any business, in government and so on, for me, the hallmark of agility is focus. And when you have a situation like this, there are 30, 40, 50, or 100 top priority initiatives that need to be dealt with. And unless you have task force that are focused specifically on one of those, if you've got this group of people that are trying to handle 5 or 10 things, they become so inefficient and so unwieldy that just nothing's ever going to get done. And I really do not believe that you know, I've built several portals, online portals, something that the government are putting together. I do not believe that will be ready by the end of April. I'd like to see, I hope it will, but I don't believe it will. And I'm not counting on it being. So I've told my team, we're on our own until proven otherwise. So we have to become profitable if you want to make any money. If you want to go home, you can go home. But if you want to volunteer, you can be here. If furlough comes through and we can see that it's available, then, you know, we may be able to backdate it for those team members that went home because they felt that they were, you know, needing to protect themselves and their families. But the others, we're here trying to do business and trying to make ourselves profitable. So that's our big game now is how do we cut back and become so lean in this new model that we can actually cover the costs of operating, include paying team members enough money to pay their day-to-day living, their rent and so on. Because not paying their landlords is great. You know, yeah, the landlords will give them a holiday, but that's a knock-on effect as well, because, you know, the landlords don't pay their mortgages, then one day they're going to be repossessed, and you know, it's not the answer. Deferring payments isn't the answer either. So it's how do we get people spending money, feeling confident, and spending money to keep the economy going. I mean, I think that most people who live in major cities want to have local restaurants, local businesses when everything comes back to normal, if it ever does, the way we, you know.
So could we now do a walkthrough of the restaurant? I'm really curious how things are running, how you've repurposed it. So if we can switch to mobile and have a look at that.
I'll do that. I'll just jump on this. I mean,
and maybe we could start from outside. I wouldn't mind seeing from the outside in view.
No problem. I'll do that. You know, I'm just really interested in. I think we're going to upload a couple of resources, aren't we, onto especially onto this YouTube channel, once that goes, the proper copy, we can put some links to some documents on there that might be of help.
Yeah, maybe we can give a little walkthrough on how people can sort of set this up and do it too. Yes.
Yeah, and I'd be very keen to try to sort of, answer specific questions, because I mean, maybe people just comment on the 393-954.
We could comment on the YouTube video. We're actually live and watching that. So if we have some specific questions as we go, we could easily do that. I've put it on Twitter and LinkedIn in a few places.
I'm just going to switch off my audio, otherwise you're going to get feedback.
Okay, so as I was saying, we can have a look there. And if you have some questions, while you're getting set up, Riccardo, I can see your video, so that's good. What I'm going to do is I'll switch into speaker view, so that way, once you become dominant, I'll mute and we'll be able to see you well.
I think you should be able to hear me now, can you?
I can hear you now.
Yeah, I'll just put on my Bluetooth so you can hear these. There we go.
And what I'll do is I'll mute as we walk around, and I'll unmute to ask you questions. Otherwise, I want to keep it on the main view so we can see you.
There's Bobby the dog. Hey, there's a restaurant mascot. She's my dog, rescue dog. I got her here. All the good things I got in my life, I got through this restaurant, by the way. I met my wife, Petronella, here. All my team members. Oh, you want to start on the outside? Okay, so okay, so this is the restaurant. That's the signage there, Riccardos restaurant. We're in the Fulham Road in Chelsea, between South Kensington and Gloucester Road. So we started putting up sort of deli signs. It's been raining a little bit, a shower of rain, so it needs to be rewritten, done in chalk. Deli signs, little sign about the Ribber State Organic Farm, and it's actually been really, really successful. And we know we had a loo roll shortage, so there's a bit of loo roll. This is what it looks like from the outside. This is where our covered terrace is, where we would normally be dining, especially in all this great weather we've been having. And so this is what it looks like from the outside now. And so a lot of people, especially the weather was really good recently, and so we had a lot of people just walking around the streets, and I think that was very good for we were lucky in that respect, because it raised awareness of what we were doing. We're a bit low on stock because we're waiting for delivery, but things like this, we always used to cook these things, and this is a gluten-free chocolate and almond cake, but now we cook it and put it straight upstairs into the room, and all the smells, and people love that when they come into the shop and they can actually smell the cake. And it's something that we're saying, oh, when we go back to being a restaurant, we're going to carry on doing this, and probably have the restaurant as part deli as well.
Riccardo, could you turn your phone sideways? We'll get more of a view. It'll be easier to see. That's perfect. Thank you.
How's that? Again, here, this is normally absolutely full with fruit and vegetables, but we just had some big orders today, and we've pretty much sold out, so we have to wait until tomorrow to get some more stock. A lot of wine, and things like water. People want mineral water, organic eggs, almond milk. This is the restaurant that used to be full of tables and is now just our center of operations. We've got our backlog up here, which is this is more just generally a to-do list at the moment, but we're going to write it up now that everything's calmed down a little bit.
Could you go back, Riccardo, a moment, because a lot of people aren't familiar with this agile way of working. If you could just zoom in and show us what you mean by this backlog.
Yeah, so I was just saying, we're making everything visible that we need to do, and prioritizing in order of importance. So, for example, suppliers to contact: Alivini, Berkman, Murray's, rubbish collection. So these are bills reduction. So rubbish collection, landlords for the restaurant, team landlords. So any team members who wanted us to contact their landlords, we were offering to do that. We had the bread company that we need to deal with. So these are in order of priority of people that we need to contact. So tomorrow morning when we come in, that's the order we do it in. And I will have this set up more like this. So we have a doing, done, and a to-do column. So then team members can actually see what we're doing. And a lot of this has actually been done, so we can move them across. So we're trying to make everything visible. So any team member, when we'll red tag things that are important. So we needed to buy another freezer. Some things start to go out of yeah, so I've got one thing left on our doing for the day. So a team member should be able to come in on a split shift and look at the board and actually know what's going on. And we'll probably spend a little bit more time on this tomorrow, actually rewriting these into a more manageable and understandable format. So the idea in Agile is that any team member or any stakeholder in the company should be able to walk in and actually just look at the board and see from that what the priorities are and what people are working on, what's been done. Got drivers down there, so when we need drivers, so these are Deliveroo drivers, we take their number. So sometimes they're in the area, we need an extra delivery done, and they'll come and just do it for a $5 or whatever it is. And then these are orders. So every time we run out of something, we just stick the orders up on a board. But again, once they're actually done, we move them across so everybody can see that things have been ordered. These now are the orders for this evening. So orders to do, orders done, evening orders. So when you come in, I know these have to be done in the evening. And we've laid out everything so that we can all work in one very small, it's a little bit of a mess now, but in one small area. And again, so we've just silly things.
A question for you, Riccardo.
Yeah.
Who creates all those tickets, all the little post-it notes we can see? How did they come to be?
We may be having a discussion about something and somebody will come up with an idea or something that needs to be done. So we immediately say, okay, let's write that down. Let's put it on the backlog. And then every morning and every afternoon we're meeting and we're reprioritizing the backlog in real time based on a total replan based on what's actually happened. And now things are moving so fast that we're having to reprioritize constantly. So it's not
Give us an idea for today. What happened that changed today from when you started off your morning meeting to now?
Well, yesterday, we had this conversation with this chap I was telling you about earlier, who was very concerned about his wife and so on. And that happened at about 2 o'clock, 2:30 in the afternoon, I think. And so I said, okay, let's just shut it down. So go home. So we shut down for the day. I stayed on doing some deliveries of deli items. We closed the restaurant. So now we lost 2 people out of the kitchen. That was yesterday. And then today we had another conversation with the rest of the team. You know, are you committed or not? I've got some volunteers, and we lost another one. And so we had planned to do a lot of social media tomorrow, but now we're training all my front of house team members on kitchen work and redoing, reorganizing our whole menu and menu structure, and based on what we feel we can deliver effectively and efficiently, and based on the product mix of what people have been ordering for the last week or two.
Has that changed at all in a pandemic? Are people ordering different foods? I mean, I feel like everybody in the world's eating a lot of pasta and chocolate right now, but that could just be
they're eating a lot more comfort food. But interestingly, I mean, we used to sell enormous amount of pappardelle with a venison ragu, and now we're selling about 10 times more penne with tomato and basil. So people are going much simpler. Stews, things like pollo cacciatore, you know, is a chicken hunter stew, polenta, those type of things seem to be going very well. And yes, chocolate cake, which has been flying out. I think we're selling 2 of those big chocolate cakes a day. Somebody came in and bought 2 on her own just the other day, which is 24 portions. And somebody took 8 tiramisu today. Was that the one for the birthday? Yeah. And interesting, do you remember I was telling you that, you know, I put my, I'll get you a flyer just so I can show you sorry, just one sec. I got this flyer that we put out through people's doors. And it basically just says, you know, we're open, we can do that. And it's got a copy of the menu on the back.
Actually, what is your address? We might as well, if people are getting hungry hearing about chocolate cake, if I was in London, I'd be calling you right now. So give us a little plug for where people can actually go and order this stuff.
Riccardos Italian Restaurant.co.uk.
Okay, do you have it there? You can hold it up. Because it's 2 C's, isn't it, Riccardo? Yeah. Hold that up.
Hold on, let me just do it. I'll do it sideways. I think that might be easier than.
Okay.
Does that work?
Hey, yeah, and one idea I've seen some people doing, I was going to ask you, when you talk about the hospital and the hospital staff, you mentioned maybe being able to deliver to the patients themselves.
Yes, I got one done today.
So tell us about that. This is great, because I just, quick aside, I asked Riccardo, I said, you know, we talk to each other all the time, and he says, oh, so the latest idea, you know, how do we get people to both sponsor things, or is there some idea? And he said, I need to know, can I get a meal all the way through to the hospital? So I haven't heard the latest. I'm excited.
Yeah, so Petronella tweeted something about us delivering risotto, mushroom risotto to Chelsea, to the Royal Brompton. And a chap wrote in and said, I think actually I'll probably find it. It was something like, my daughter's in there as a patient. She hasn't heard anything about your restaurant food. And no, I can't find it right now. You know, she hasn't heard anything about your restaurant food. And Petronella said, yeah, but they're only doing that for the staff. And he said, well, she's really, really dying for some good food. So I then just tweeted him and just said, look, here's my mobile number. Call me if you want me to deal with it. He called me and I said, okay, look, first one's on the house. She just wanted a pizza and a Coca-Cola. But let me see if I can get it through. And so 10 minutes later, we had the pizza ready. I ran up there and it was so friendly. I can't tell you. And they knew the young lady and they said, oh, she'll be really happy that we'll rush it up to the ward. And then I got a really nice message from him saying, she's so happy. Thank you so much. We know where your website is. We'll now order and you could deliver straight to her on a regular basis. Thank you. You know, so we can do the Royal Brompton. So yeah,
oh, that's one. And we don't know about the other one. We'll have to try Chelsea. Will you deliver in other areas or do you have to really stay local? Sorry, you were going to talk about Chelsea.
No, I went in there the other day and the receptionist didn't want me to leave food. Wanted me to take it up to the ward. So, you know, I think there are different things. And I had certain delivery drivers didn't want to take things up to the ward. I mean, I don't mind, but they don't want to go inside hospitals because they think they're dangerous. But
actually, this is a point. I wonder if there's anyone out there, because we're trying to, you know, one of the reasons we're doing this little series is to both get ideas out and help multiple people at the same time. While we're talking, I'm wondering if there's people who have actually had COVID-19. This is what we're looking for. The people who've had it, we know they've had it and they've recovered. If there's anyone out there who can do things like delivery up, that would be interesting, right? Those are the people we need to start repurposing in society in interesting ways. So do get in touch if anyone's out there.
I think that's very interesting. I mean, it's just, yeah, quicker we can get those tests out, the better. But in the meantime, I mean, it's just, you've got to play that balance between the mental health and the physical health. You know, people I personally don't feel at risk. I mean, I just don't. I don't feel at risk, and maybe I'm being naive. Or I know I had some very weird flu back in January, which I never normally get flu, and it was like nothing I've ever had before. So maybe I've had this. I mean, if people sort of rumors going around saying that it has been around for longer than we think, then
well,
maybe
actually,
I have had it. So
that's really interesting you say that, because we had the same thing, and we'd been in London and we came back to Portugal, and it seemed too early, but it was the weirdest flu. And now I've seen the symptoms to a T. Like, I can't tell you every little part, including losing the smell, all sorts of things. And there wasn't anything else unless I had a weird combination of a cold followed by a flu followed by pneumonia, with all the shortness of breath, etc. And we thought it was too early, but I read an article the other day saying that there were Brits who went to Austria and they all had it, and they came back, and that was January. So I think it's been in the population for a while, and this is going to be the interesting part of getting things back on the feet. People who know they've had it, but also the ones, if we can get the antibody test, then we can really run business again. So this is where trying to keep these supply lines going long enough, and back to your point, it's private entrepreneurship, relying on governments. I think this is where maybe we all do need to step up, because individuals can pivot a lot faster than I suspect governments are. And we've had this is back to these sort of agile principles, autonomy, and we take control, because I feel like we're all waiting for this sort of silver bullet leadership, which I don't know if it really exists. I think people taking individual leadership is going to be really important. And this is where I'm thinking people like you, Riccardo, who's got this incredibly nimble mind and a way of looking at the world. Because every day I speak to you, you make me feel great, because you're so positive. You keep saying, oh, wow, this is really fun. Who knows what's going to happen? We're just going to change things and do something. And you take action, where most people are sitting there eating your chocolate cake and, sort of miserable with what else do we do now. You've got an incredibly different way of looking at this.
I think, well, I do work on it. In the morning I get up and I do a bit of stretching, and I spend the first hour or 2 hours of the day really getting my head straight, because I know as soon as I walk out the door, you're hit by all these messages and all this weird stuff. So I think the thing I can control is my first 2 or 3 hours of the day before I see anyone, or I leave my phone on because 24/7, because I'm kind of on call. But most people are not up when I'm up. So I get some quiet time, and then I just get busy. As long as I'm moving and doing something that I have prioritized with my team, because I'll often ask them, I say, guys, I don't know what to do. I got these 20 things on my list. What do you think is the most important thing? We'll have a chat for 5 minutes, and we'll have a replan after 2 or 3 hours of work. And sometimes you got through the list very quickly because you were very focused, and it's like, okay, what shall I do next? And 3 people say you should do that. You say, okay, I'll do that. So I don't think you're ever going to know 100% what your top priority is, but you can go pretty close and just focus on one thing at a time and get it done. And I think everything starts to fall apart when you stop moving and when you try to do 2 things at the same time.
So today, what's your top priority? Give us an example of how that would work.
Right now, replan.
Okay.
So I need to, as soon as this call's over, call the whole team in. Get Antonio's leaving. He was my head chef. He's going back home. I mean, in London, but he's going to go and take a week off and think about what he wants to do. He's under a lot of family pressure to stay at home. So the handover of the kitchen, really.
Okay.
It's been quite a few years since I was full time in the kitchen. So and then the next priority would be streamline the offering of what we can offer. Again, that's another replan. We're going to completely redo our menu in the next 24 hours. So if you look at our website now, what's available, 24 hours time, it'll be different. I should do some screenshots of that so that you can kind of see the iteration as it goes.
Actually, yeah, doing almost like a time lapse or screenshots would be interesting. All right. Well, I think that's probably enough for today. I'm quite curious to check in. We might do some shorter check-ins as we go, as things change. Real time.
What I'm really interested in is sort of doing Q&A. I mean, if we did another one, in a couple of days' time. And if anybody had any answers, any questions they needed answering, I'm really happy to do that and make everything we're doing open source. Happy for anyone to jump in on a Zoom call with us and try to brainstorm some ways out of it, because we're doing something proactive, I believe, but I think that it's going to take every small business to be moving right now and planning, because there could be stuff. I heard a statistic the other day, and I don't know how realistic it is, but I was like, oh my God, if they say that they're going to release the ban in America 2 weeks after the last reported case or the last death, whichever comes sooner, we could be here until July on lockdown.
Well, and you think about that, what's going to happen is they're not going to want to open the floodgates for July and August to suddenly be party Summersville. So they're going to clamp down in some way. I mean, it would be insane to go from total lockdown to totally not lockdown. So I think there's going to be, it's still going to be prohibited on some level. There's going to be some checks and balances. So we're not going to go back to normal for some time. This is that sense of people moving into acceptance, thinking this is a new reality. How do we now transfer our skills? I'm hearing all sorts of people having to repurpose their entire work. I mean, what would you do next if you couldn't get the business going? If you can't clear enough cash reserves to keep running, what's your next plan B?
It's not an option.
Right.
I don't believe in having contingency plans, because I think that you can never plan for what's going to come up. And so I think we're all clever enough to figure it out when it happens, if it happens. But I think if, in a way, sometimes I know there's a lot of quantum theory that says, you expand what you focus on. And so if I start focusing on what happens if things go wrong, I'm thinking about things going wrong, and I don't want to go there. I don't want to go into that space at all.
That's quite interesting. Yes, when things are moving so fast, you don't really have the capacity, because if you don't put 100% in to making things work now, that's a good point. Okay. And we talked about this the other day, the scenario planning versus scenario training, contingency training as opposed to contingency planning. So being ready to adapt fast.
Yeah, and teaching people how to adapt in situations rather than what to do in a specific situation.
Is this going to be a problem with your team changing? Because you've built up an adaptive, resilient team. Suddenly you're going to have all new people. How are you going to pass on that way of thinking fast? Or are you screening for people that can deal with this?
I'm Scrum training. I'm Scrum training every day now.
Really?
So
what does that look like?
It's pulling out the scrum.org diagram, which I don't have right here with me, but just on a call, and going through the whole cycle. It's like a mini version of Henrik Nyberg's Product Owner in a Nutshell, but I can do it in 4 minutes.
Okay, so, maybe we're going to do that. The next time you're doing it, let's do a call. I want to see that in action.
Oh yeah, no, I'd love to.
Okay, brilliant.
Yeah. Good.
All right, well, I'm not going to hold you up any longer. You've got to be pivoting with purpose and making this all happen. So thank you, Riccardo, and I'm looking forward to checking in with you again soon.
And me too. Take care.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks. Kelly. Bye-bye.